What is a virus? A virus is a complicated assembly of molecules, including proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and carbohydrates. It's an extremely small infectious agent which we humans are under constant threat from. So the question we're trying to answer today: is a virus a living organism? Look at this chair. Is it a living organism? It isn't. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't move. But are these the only defining characteristics which separates the living from the non-living? Are there any other characteristics displayed by living organisms? Living organisms display several characteristics and follow various life processes like nutrition, respiration, and excretion. This is a basic framework we use to see if something is a living organism or not. Let's look at the case of a virus. We ask some questions which help us distinguish between living and non-living things. So does a virus have its own biological machinery to replicate? Viruses replicate and multiply, but they are not able to do that on their own. They need to first take over the complex machinery of a living cell to be able to rapidly replicate. Without a host cell, a virus is unable to reproduce. So does a virus multiply through cellular division? Viruses assemble themselves by using the host cell to manufacture and put together viral components. Unlike living organisms, they cannot self-divide, splitting a single cell into two. Do viruses grow in size? Viruses do not grow in size. They are formed by putting various components together. Are viruses capable of motion? They are not capable of movement by themselves. To move, they are totally dependent on the environment they are in. Does a virus show signs of metabolism? Viruses are too small and simple to collect or use their own energy. They just steal it from the cells they infect. Each answer proves that the virus is not a living being. A virus does not display any of the characteristics which a living organism exhibits. So then, why is there a common misconception of viruses being considered as living organisms? The main reason for that misconception could be because they reproduce. Viruses are more complex than a lifeless collection of molecules like this chair. They do show one of the most important signs of life, the ability to reproduce. And reproduction is a sign of life. Viruses reproduce, or maybe we should say, replicate. What is overlooked is that they are unable to reproduce on their own. So there you go. A virus is not a living organism after all. The most special day of the year is our birthday. And birthday gets with it a delicious birthday cake. But what if cakes were never so delicious and fluffy? Well, the fluffiness is all thanks to the yeast that helps it get spongy. But the yeast is just so tiny. And how can it help us so much? Well, there are several organisms tinier than yeast that help us to obtain many useful products. These little creatures are called microorganisms. Now, as the name says, micro means very small or microscopic structures, while organisms are living beings. Thus, those organisms which cannot be observed with naked eyes and require a microscope to be seen are the microorganisms. These tiny creatures come in various shapes, forms, and structures. For studying them, a proper categorization is really necessary. Thus, we classify these microorganisms, simply referred to as microbes, in four major classes: bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and algae. Let's get introduced to each. Let us begin with bacteria first. They are usually unicellular prokaryotic organisms. What do you mean by this? Unicellular, as the name suggests, are made up of single cell. So the entire body of the organism consists of just one cell? Yes, that is how it is. And what do we mean by prokaryotic? Well, the word arises from two Greek terms. The term pro means before, that refers to primitive form, whereas the term karyon means kernel or nut, and here it refers to a membrane-bound nucleus. So prokaryotic organisms are those which do not have a proper well-defined nucleus. As we can see here, in these organisms, the genetic material is randomly scattered in the cytoplasm. So when we say that the bacteria are unicellular prokaryotes, it means they have a single cell which is of a primitive type without a well-defined nucleus. Would studying them be simpler then? Not really. Bacteria, in spite of their unicellular and prokaryotic nature, come in diverse forms. They come in various shapes and sizes and are present almost everywhere around us. So how do we study so many types? It's simple. We classify them into categories. Based on their shapes, we classify them into 4 major groups. As we can see here, the spherical ones called coccus or plural cocci. Then these rod-shaped ones called the bacillus or plural bacilli. Then we have these comma-shaped bacteria called vibrio, plural vibrios. And lastly, we have these spiral-shaped ones called the spirillum or plural spirilla. There are numerous other ways of classifying the bacteria. However, we restrict ourselves to only this one simple type based on shapes. Now, where do you think these bacteria will be found? In isolated places or scattered at specific points? Will they be found only on land or only in water or both? Well, there is a single word which describes their presence, and that word is everywhere. Yes, there is no single place on this earth where you won't find bacteria. May it be the hot springs or the ice-cladded regions. May it be the salty Dead Sea or even the marshy lands. They are present everywhere. And let me tell you an amazing fact. Some of them are even present inside you. But don't worry, the ones inside you are like friends. They won't harm you in any way. Well, this was about the various types of bacteria in short. Now we need to take a look at the next category of microorganisms as well. Let's talk about the fungi in the next video. We all have noticed the cottony growth on a stale piece of leftover bread. It happens with many food items when they are left open, especially in moisture. But have you ever wondered why? What exactly gets this cotton-like substance here? What is it made up of? Well, the cottony growth is nothing but a set of live cells. Yes, these are living cells, and this fact is more than enough for us to study them. By now you must have guessed the name of these organisms. Yes, I am referring to the fungi. Fungus is usually a broad term used to cover many organisms together. The group consists of microscopic as well as macroscopic organisms. What do we mean by this? Microscopic means those which can only be observed under the microscope. So the cottony growth that you find on stale bread can be included in this category. On the other hand, macro means huge. So those which are big enough to be observed with naked eyes are macroscopic organisms. Which organisms can we consider as an example of this type? Well, mushrooms and puffballs can be included in this category. Let's talk about the microscopic types first. These being too small, what do you think will be their structure? Do you think they will always be unicellular? Well, not all. Only a few types like yeast are unicellular, whereas others, in spite of being microscopic, are multicellular in nature. The unicellular forms exist as one single cell which performs all the activities efficiently. On the other hand, the multicellular ones have bodies comprising of many cells that coordinate to bring about smooth processes. The multicellular body usually consists of this stalk-like structure and a cap on top of it. This cap comes in various forms. Some of them may have a bag-like structure. Others may have umbrella-shaped structure. Both these are dedicated to a special role. They contain spores of the fungi, which can be dispersed to give rise to a new fungal bodies on germination. Now moving to the stalk, this usually consists of long slender filaments. These filaments are the cells that make up the entire fungal body. They form a dense network together. So are these filaments given any specific name? Scientifically, they are addressed as the hyphae or singular hypha. These threads get interwoven to form a network. This structure is what we call as the mycelium. So can we say that the mycelium is a collection of hyphae? Yes. And can we also say that the fungal body is made up of mycelium? Absolutely. Thus, this stalk that we can see here and also these root-like structures are all mycelium made up of hyphae. Now, one more important question that pops up here. Are these hyphae made up of one continuous tube? Or they are made up of smaller sections? Let's zoom in further to know this. Some fungi have hyphae that have partitions. These partitions, as we can see here, are called as the septa or singular septum. So such types of hyphae are called as septate hyphae. Now, can you guess the next type? They will be without the septum. In many fungi, you find no partitions in the hyphae. These are called as aseptate hyphae. Another name for such type is cenocytic hyphae. Now, you may wonder as to why the structure of these hyphae is so important to us. What could be their possible function? Well, apart from forming the entire body of the fungi, these help in many ways. Hyphae are ideal for absorbing nutrients from the surrounding food source. Precisely, the tip of these hyphae release enzymes that bring about digestion of food outside the body. After breakdown, these nutrients are absorbed directly by the hyphae and are passed to various parts of the fungal body. If the hyphae are aseptate, then the nutrients can be directly passed. However, in septate hyphae, the case is different. The septa have small pores which allow passage or even exchange of substances. The hyphae are also known to contain cytoplasm and a few important organelles. And most important is the presence of nuclei inside them. Thus, the genetic material of the fungus is locked in these hyphae. For all these reasons, the hyphae are important to us while studying the fungi. Well, this was the multicellular structure of fungi. But this is what we observe under the microscope, right? So will the huge macroscopic structures that we see in case of mushrooms have a similar internal structure or something different? Think for a moment. Well, astonishingly, these also have a similar internal structure. So the body of the mushroom will also be made up of mycelium. Similar to the microscopic ones, even this mycelium will be made up of interwoven hyphae. So we may find slight modifications in these different types of fungi, but the basic structure remains the same. Well, you may wonder as to why we need to study about these fungi. What is their importance? Let me explain. There are several important roles that fungi play in ours as well as other organisms' lives. Some of them include forming a symbiotic relation with plant roots. Symbiotic means a mutual give and take relation. So both organisms, the plant as well as the fungi, are benefited in some or the other way. Secondly, helping us with many medicinal important products. Do you know any such product obtained from fungi? Of course you do. You are familiar with the antibiotic penicillin? This is obtained from the fungi of genus Penicillium. Similarly, many of the foods that we relish, including bakery items and cheese, are all a gift of various fungi to us. So don't you think studying them is important for us? That is the reason why we have a complete branch of microbiological studies dedicated for studying fungi exclusively. This is called mycology, where mycos is fungi and logos is study. Well, this was about the fungi. Do you remember the next type of microorganism we'd mentioned? Yes, it's protozoa. So let's have a look at this type in the next video.